Hello, hello, hello. Testing one, two, three. Sorry, I thought I was on the air, but I had the microphone was on mute. And there's a little overlap there, given that Judge Darrell was using that mute button invariably to shut up this animal, Darrell Edward Brooks. That was his plan, to constantly interrupt. And even though Judge Darrell talked about Darrell um, and advising him of decorum, uh, court etiquette, Darrell Brooks wasn't going to be following suit with that. And I believe he wasn't going to follow suit with that because it was them against him. He wasn't on board with them. Why would he be on board with them knowing that them is trying to take him to see Bubba? So throughout the entire trial, you can't expect Darrell to comply at all because it was only one person against everybody in that courtroom. So it made sense the way he acted that way. I mean, in theory, it didn't make sense, but it makes sense for somebody that we know is stupid. And that's exactly a accurate description of who Darrell Brooks is. The epitome of stupidity. All right, and so as promised, I did say that I wanted to speak concerning the other portion relative to this sentencing uh, phase. I won't say of the trial because this is no longer a trial anymore, given that the verdicts has already been received, and he has been convicted, despite his protestations of him asserting that he does not consent to the sentence. But irrespective of what he believes, how he feels, he will be accountable, held accountable, relative to his heinous and horrific crimes. So let's jump in here and hear our beloved Judge Darrell.
Wrong, and that he simply chooses to ignore his conscience. He is fueled by anger and rage.
Absolutely.
Some people, unfortunately, choose a path of evil. And I think, Mr. Brooks, you are one of those such persons.
Exactly.
As a mom, my heart breaks for your family, for your mom, and for your grandmother. The son that she raised, the grandson that your grandmother knew, the hopes and dreams they had for your life, they're gone. And I think it's perhaps far easier for them to blame a mental illness than to perhaps come to grips with their son did very, very bad things.
Can I say something real quick? First of all, I agree totally, wholeheartedly with Judge Darrell, because that's exactly what his family was doing. In other words, it was easy for them to suggest uh, the mental health needs of Darrell Brooks as an excuse, or watch this, as a cushion, to cushion the impact that he really should be facing. That's all that was. His family was nothing but a chaser, trying to cushion the impact of that alcohol, yo. He said. Or trying to cushion the impact of a 7,000-year sentence. Okay, let me say this. I believe. You know what? Do you know why I believe that Dawn Woods is the true is the enemy in this? And I'm talking about enemy, in her alignment. in her complicity. She was complicit relative to her own sons. Horrific encounter at that parade. The reason why I say that Dawn Woods is the enemy of those people that were killed, because you know what she said in an interview? She said, and some of you may have seen her interview when she was asked, she said that Darrell Brooks did not intentionally kill those people. That's what she said. He didn't kill them. He didn't do that intentionally. So basically, you know what that means? She's basically saying, because that's what Darrell Brooks was arguing, it was about intent. See, he couldn't disprove or refute the evidence that the state had, but then he had to jump to intent. And that's what he was saying. But what broke down that credibility was the fact that he kept on driving. So that broke that messed up his whole argument or defense of intent. You change your clothes, you keep driving over the people, you backed up over the people. Oh man, it was horrific. I can't even imagine what the jury was thinking when the judge granted for that exhibit and granted that exhibit to be published, and the jury saw that video in its entirety of Darrell Brooks driving through that parade. So there was nothing he can do in terms of the evidence against him, but he wanted to argue intent. Intent. And his mother said in an interview that Darrell Brooks did not intentionally kill those people. So that let me know she didn't give a F about none of those victims or the people he killed just as much as he didn't. Because if Darrell Brooks would have won that case off of it not being by intent, then that means all those people that got killed, it didn't matter. He got off. And so basically she was on board with that. Because that's what his argument was, intent. Even though it was disproved. Even though it was debunked, even though it was refuted. But that's what he was trying to sell. That's what he was trying to sell the jury. And so Darrell Brooks's mother is just as much as the enemy of those people as Darrell was, because she was on board with that so-called BS not being by intent. It was absolutely by intent. Otherwise, the fool would have stopped driving. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm getting a little, you know how I get when I talk about this fool. And yes, his mother is complicit. He argued intent. She paralleled his argument of intent, because she said that he did not do this by intent. He didn't kill them people by intent. The devil is a liar, and so are you, Dawn Woods. And I don't care if she hear this. She needs to be held accountable. She was complicit all through this trial, sending those pictures. You don't think the prosecution was listening to them phone calls? Ooh, all right, let's get back into this sentence. I'm sorry, y'all. Let me.
Due to very bad motivations. One of the things ultimately that will happen when you are in prison, sir, is that the Department of Corrections, they are statutorily responsible for your care and your well.
Last year, 2021.
I'm sorry, y'all. But at least when I had, first of all, I had hit the button inadvertently. But at least the video had showed Erica, so we're still like in the, at least, you know, that's his baby mom. You know, it wasn't like, I hit the button and we start watching the Cosby Show. Y'all ain't saying the like. Where did that come from? Y'all ain't saying. All right, let's get back into this sentencing.
I think it's important that the sentence here today focuses on your conduct on November 21 of 2021 and the moments leading up to that tragic and fateful decision of yours to drive through the Waukesha Christmas parade, and of course the moments after. I, of course, through my sentencing remarks and ultimately what I do here today, I can't answer all of the questions. I can't address all of the issues, including the why. Perhaps the one question that will remain unanswered. Why?
Exactly.
Why did you barrel down White Rock Avenue? Why did you not stop? Why did you keep going? Many of us in this courtroom sat through the entire trial. And what we learned is that very early on in the afternoon of November 21, starting at around 1 p.m., the police got ready for the parade. The staging area was set up, and that was all along White Rock Avenue. Signs were put in place. Ultimately, barricades were put up at a number of locations on Main Street and surrounding that. We know, because we heard from Sergeant Warner about what he had done, and he had, right before the start of the parade, had driven down the parade route. It was on his shoulders, his responsibility to make sure everything was safe and in order. What's important about that staging area, sir, is we know that is where the altercation with Erica Patterson really came to a head. We all watched that video, multiple videos. And we know that even before that, you appeared angry and upset. 2 individuals testified about you being at that mobile gas station, how you turned the wrong way down a one-way street, waved your hands in the air, rolled down your window, either exchanged gestures or words with one of the drivers. Perhaps 30 minutes or so before the start of the parade, maybe an hour or so before you drove down the parade route. But what's important is the signage. Even you, at one point, I believe when you were talking with Detective Carpenter, noted, it was my words, my assessment, it was clear something was going on. I think what you said was a lot of shit was blocked off. You'd driven past those signs on the staging area.
Shut up!
The fact remains they were there, sir. And the fact remains is you told Detective Carpenter that.
He sure enough did. Shut your mouth.
We then heard from the witnesses related to Miss Patterson. We heard from Corey Runkle. We heard from Erica Patterson herself. My impression, based upon Erica Patterson's testimony, who, by the way, she showed grace and dignity facing you, the man who clearly has no regard for her as a mother of one of your children, as someone you had a domestic partnership with and a relationship with at one point.
That's not true.
Shut your mouth.
No. And I would say this goes to your character. What was shown through that altercation and going up the hill, following her, slapping her, the rules don't matter to you. Not the rules of the road, not the rules established by court orders, not the rules even of decorum and decency. And I'll get to this more fully when I talk about your character. And I know you went hard at Attorney Opper for her bringing these things up, but those are legitimate, lawful sentencing considerations.
Right.
And when I get to that point, I'll tell you the case law that supports that. Your character, even your pending cases.
I don't need no case law.
Ain't that? Hold up. Did y'all hear what she just said? Even his pending cases. So it's like, not only is he being sentenced for all this murder and driving through that parade, but he got pending stuff like this dude. And it all goes back, and I've been saying this, and we all know this, because of the voluminous amount of charges this man has had. He's got pending cases. Why? I listen, I'm grappling with two fights. The first fight that I'm grappling with is, why did he drive through that parade? And the second fight that I'm grappling with is, why was he still allowed bail at a precipitously low rate? What in the world is wrong with the justice system in the state of Wisconsin? You know what, y'all, audience? I hope y'all don't ever move there. Don't y'all ever go to Wisconsin. Because somebody can kill you and possibly get off. Obviously, Darrell Brooks tried to kill Erica Patterson. He ran her over in a car. That is attempted murder. And his bail was basically $100. That's 10% of $1,000. He basically got off and then proceeded to commit even more crimes. Whew.
We know at the time of all of this, right, you were out on bond for 2 felony cases, one involving a handgun, one involving the same vehicle and Erica Patterson, and one involving ultimately intimidation of Ms. Patterson. We know that on November 20th, and she was very contrite about this, she told you where she was. She invited you out there.
I don't know why.
And that you had contact with her on the 20th. There was some physical.
Shut your mouth.
Mr. Brooks, this is my time. You need to not interrupt.
That's the reason why the charge was dropped.
Mr. Brooks.
Shut up.
The state
You need to stop.
Shut your mouth.
Wrote you, Your Honor, and said that they know it was no incident that day.
You a liar.
Mr.
And
Brooks,
now you want to sit up here.
do not interrupt me
you-
or you will be removed to the other
and now
courtroom.
you want to sit up
You
here
a liar.
Stop.
and try to
now.
add something in that you know for
You
a
a
fact
liar.
never even happened. You want to sit up here
Mr.
and talk
Brooks,
You a
about
liar.
every
who has
time
grace and all this. You talking about someone
Shut your
with
mouth.
5 kids that don't have custody.
you need to stop
None of
right
them.
now or
And
you
you
will be
didn't have-
removed.
Remove me then.
And you didn't have custody of them either. So ain't no damn honor amongst thieves. Ain't no honor amongst thieves. If she's a bad mother, then you fall worst as a father. You attempted murder. That's attempted murder when you ran her over with a car. See, y'all notice, let me tell y'all something. Y'all notice how in that interrogation room he kept blaming her, but now the judge is basically talking about him and how horrible he is. See, he can't take the heat. He can't take that heat. And that's why he's interrupting. He can't take a woman having the last word, telling him. But the good thing is it was a woman that put your ass, put your behind away. Watch this. Where you belong.
All right, he will be removed. He cannot simply stay
I don't
quiet
consent
when
to
this
being
court
sentenced.
talks.
Shut up,
Anyway,
you don't give
I don't
up.
consent to this. Just like I told you.
don't matter you
I don't
don't
know
consent.
He'll be in
Yeah.
recess
I
until
don't-
he's
I don't
removed
even
to
It
the
don't matter that you don't consent. You don't understand. You understand the damn charges. They were read to you in preliminary. You were made aware. You were informed. You were advised, and you were also ill-advised. But I think we need to address the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room was you wasn't gonna win this case. You didn't have a chance. Just like he gonna say, it was already written what was gonna happen. Y'all heard him say that? It was written what's gonna happen from day one. That's when he was talking about he wasn't worried about the inevitable. He said, I'm okay. I'm okay with that, child. I don't know how you can be. I don't know how I can be okay with 7,000 years. Oh, I need you to touch your neighbor and say, I thank God it ain't me. The devil is a liar. I know that's right. Touch your neighbor and say, I thank God it ain't me. I don't know how he can be okay with that. Amen. But I thank God it ain't me. The devil is, you know what y'all ain't saying out there. My. And so he basically went in, had a nonchalant attitude about it, like he didn't care. He didn't care. Y'all remember on the last video he said, am I angry? Hell yeah. Am I upset? Hell yeah. Yeah. But then after that he said, but so what? See, I don't see that Darrell Brooks is crazy. Somebody put you in jail for 7,000 years. You talk about so what? Yeah, you like nigga, you ain't coming out of there unless there's a body bag with you in it. All right, let's get back into this.
Understand the true nature and cause.
He know the true nature. Come on. He knows the true nature. Not only is the jury not only is the jury aware of his tactics, but I'm damn sure, I'm for certain that the Court of Appeals are very much aware. Can you imagine what they could be thinking? Because they got to read all the transcripts, everything that was put on that record. They got to see all that. They're going to be like, oh my God, this was buffoonery. Textbook buffoonery. Because Darrell Brooks, he had a plan that failed him greatly. He was playing with fire. And let me tell you about fire. Fire is just like Murphy's Law. You know what Murphy's Law is? Anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Y'all ain't saying nothing. You play with fire, I can guarantee you something is going to go wrong. And that's what he was doing. Playing with fire. He was playing with fire. He been talking in a vile and vulgar way to Judge Darrell. I mean, it was just filled with vulgarity. Oh, it was nasty. He had a nasty mouth toward her. And even displayed his vulgarity in the presence, not outside of the presence, but in the presence of the jury. Judge Darrell was always excusing the jury for the purpose of his own protection, but he was too egocentric to know it. He was not egocentric, but egotistical to understand and to know that his rights were really being protected. This is why he can never argue the contrary of that. And if he did argue it, he would look like a fool in front of the Court of Appeals. Judge Darrell habitually, invariably remove the jury for the purpose of his benefit. I told y'all in another video one time before. Y'all remember when I said that Darrell Brooks was probably right when he said, "Ain't none of this to benefit me." Well, that is true in theory, because it was all of them against him. So there was nothing in there to benefit him, because ultimately he was going back to his cage. That sewer rat was going back to his cage. And so he knew there was nothing there to benefit him. But legally, the judge, the Empire Darrell, she was above board when it came to protecting his rights, even though he tried to dismantle that and make it all about him. He was the victim in this, y'all. According to him, he was the victims. That's why he interrogated all the witnesses as if they were all the suspects. That's why he did that. Okay, the whole thing was utterly bizarre.
I need to first
we're back on the record.
Confirm that Mr. Brooks is able to hear and see the court. We do have the audio and visual on. If someone, I can see on the screen, there is a headset on the table should he choose, but I have confirmation that the audio and visual are working in the other courtroom. Before I continue, of course, Mr. Brooks does have a right to be present for his sentencing. He's been present all along today up until his disruption. It was very clear to this court that he had absolutely no intention of stopping his tirade. I think there's really no other way to describe it. And this court needs to go through its remarks uninterrupted. And given the history in this case, which is well documented, of his disruptions and inability or unwillingness to follow the very simple rules of decorum and courtesy, which include not interrupting the court, I felt it important under Illinois versus Allen to remove him from the courtroom. As that is, of course, one of the options, and we have the benefit of the wonderful technology here in this courtroom and the adjoining courtroom, which I believe is the equivalent of being present. What I will do at times during this trial as the functional equivalent in this very courtroom. But it is important that I go through this without interruption to make the record that I need to make. I'm going to backtrack. No, you're not muted, sir. You're going to listen to me, and you're not going to interrupt. So I want to, I don't want to call it a tangent, but I'm looking for a note that I made. Then you need to pledge to this court, sir, that you will not interrupt me despite what you may not like me saying. Can you do that?
I would like to exercise my right to be present.
All right, he's not making that pledge, and under Illinois versus Allen, unless he makes that pledge, he's not coming back into this courtroom. You are not.
I would like to exercise my right to be present.
All right, clearly he's going to keep repeating that statement, so I have muted him at this point. It was my hope that he would honor the simple rule of courtesy and decorum, that he show respect to this court, to these proceedings, and not interrupt and talk over me, but that clearly is something he is unwilling or unable to do. I'll find my note that I wrote later. It had to do with, frankly, what this court has observed as a pattern with Mr. Brooks, and that is when testimony or statements by the court or statements by the prosecution team become unfavorable to him, he lashes out and he disrupts. And that has been borne out time after time after time during this trial. So let me go through and pick up where I left off about the trial. I'm not going to go through everything in detail, but I think it's important that I set the stage, right, and the basis for my sentencing. One of the things that I did note regarding Erica Patterson's testimony, because frankly I wasn't sure where Mr. Brooks was going to go with his own defense based on some of the remarks he made during his opening statement, which was actually later, but I guess I'll go back to my review of his recorded interview and some of the things that he tried to say, and at least it became apparent ultimately with the way he cross-examined witnesses. I wasn't sure if he would claim perhaps someone else was in the vehicle, he was afraid of police, the tinting of the windows, some of those things. Here's where it frankly doesn't matter. Okay, Erica Patterson provided key testimony in this regard, that there was no one else in the vehicle with Mr. Brooks. And I'm aware that he wants to come back, but until he writes me a pledge that he will not interrupt me under Illinois versus Allen, he is not coming back in this courtroom. He has forfeited his right to be present during my remarks. And unless he makes that pledge to me in writing, he's not coming back in.
Let me say this. I like how, well, that's the judge's job. One of the things the Empire, a trial judge, has to ensure that everything is done accurately, appropriately, and or apropos, relative to keeping the record clear, distinct. She's getting everything down in detail. If you notice, Darrell would say he would like to exercise his right to come back in the courtroom. But then she said, if you will make a pledge. He immediately ignored that, and then he kept saying, I would exercise my right to come back in the courtroom. So she had every right. If you notice, she muted him because he kept saying that and not directly answering her direct question. All right. And so she said that, and she got that documented down for the record, which is good, because all she's essentially doing is basically cutting off the likelihood of a potential appeal. That's all that is. That's all that is. And he's not helping that. And he's not helping himself, because he's exacerbating by doing the things he's doing now, by not answering directly, by constantly interrupting. I mean, there's no way the Court of Appeals is going to rule against any ruling of Judge Darrell. She went by the book the entirety of the trial. And he did not make anything better on himself by being defiant to that. And so when you hear attorney Sue Opera says that this was an open and shut case. In theory, it was. It was. They just had to get through the process. It was. Because he was an instrumental part in making it an open and shut case. Notice I said open and shut because he wouldn't shut his mouth. Ooh, all right, let's get back. So that helped the state. Thank you, Darrell. He's a pretty good prosecutor.
One of the things I tried to do in my preparation, and let me tell you, I reviewed all of my notes from this trial. I have, I think, 9 notepads. I looked at just a couple of exhibits, but primarily the map, Exhibit 15. I really wanted to determine for myself how long this carnage took. We know the distance, right? From at least where he entered. And you know what, Madam Clerk? Put my screen up, will you?
Sure. Let me see. So we're in video conference.
I'm going to put Exhibit 15 up because I think it's worth doing that. All right. We know he entered from White Rock, where the first star is on the right side, where it says Fleet 1, unmarked sedan and marked SUV. And that's where Detective Casey was. And so we know he goes 1, 2, 3 blocks before striking anyone. And then it's really about 5 blocks of what can only be described as chaos and carnage. We know we have, from the evidence and the testimony, 2 different speed calculations. One from Bosco's, that was the surveillance footage, between 33 and 34.5 miles per hour. And then we have one farther down from the footage from Curry Insurance, where it was averaged 32 miles per hour. Now, I acknowledge math is not my strong suit. I did not do a calculation, but I don't think it took very long for all of this to happen. I think it was a matter of minutes. I think 5 minutes would even be far too long. It's probably 3, maybe. And it was somewhat hard to gauge during the trial because of how the state presented, and I don't mean this as a criticism, but they were very meticulous in showing video, breaking it down, showing it at half speed, sometimes 30% speed, to really get an understanding of what was happening. And at no point did anyone ever tell me or tell the jury how long this took. But even though it took just a couple of minutes, there were so many opportunities for Mr. Brooks to simply stop, turn around, turn down other streets before he ever crossed Barstow Avenue. Exactly. And what we know is that at 4:37, Detective Tom Casey had the first police encounter with Darrell Brooks. Came face to face, Detective Casey at the hood of the car, coming eye to eye. The SUV brushed past him. And here's the thing. Detective Casey said he wasn't going very fast. To me, that tells me he had ample time to reflect about what he was about to do.
Well, you know what? That's interesting. You know what? That's the first time I looked at it in that way. How she said that he had ample time. Here's the thing: he wasn't going fast at first, and that further breaks down his whole narrative when he talks about that this was not done intentionally. It had to be if he wasn't going very fast and then he speeds up and then he keeps driving and he doesn't get out of the car to render assistance to these people that he has hit if he wants to argue that this was not done out of intent. So this debunks his mother's theory just as well as Darrell. It debunks all of that. It was definitely an attack. It was definitely done by intent. Just like Judge Darrell just indicated, according to the testimony of Thomas Casey. He said, he testified, Brooks wasn't going that fast, but he accelerated. If it's not by intent, then why are you accelerating? Come on, man. That don't, you see, I didn't even think about that. Judge Darrell's right. Let's keep on going.
If you look on that map, it's not a pledge. He's not coming in.
I know it's right.
When you come down White Rock, you can take a hard left on East Main Street. You can take what I call a soft left. I believe it's Pleasant Street. And Detective Casey, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I can't see.
By the way, I think whatever note that Judge Darrell read from Darrell, I bet you it said, I want to exercise my right to come back in the courtroom. See, that's not a pledge. That's what he kept repeating. I bet you that's probably what he wrote down.
On the map.
All right.
Frankly, you can turn around at any point in time on White Rock Avenue. But instead, and I think if you all try to picture this, as difficult as it may be, there's squads with lights, there's barricades. I know I read in the other act's motion that Mr. Brooks claimed at one point he was having a panic attack, and he, again, maybe I think he was going to claim at some point he was afraid of police. Why drive toward them?
Exactly.
Why take that right-hand turn?
Because he's stupid.
There's no reasonable explanation other than he was angry, he was full of rage, and he didn't care who he came in contact with, what he came in contact with, whether he drove past, through, at, he drove.
And mind you, y'all, he did this while having pending cases. So that's, what is that called? Bail jumping. He was already dealing with other stuff. And then he bail jumps. He gets off on bail and then commits even further, or watch this, worse crimes. Even worse.
Detective Casey pounded on the hood of that car, saw his face, again, was brushed by that SUV, thankfully not hurt. All of this preceded by the visual signs along White Rock Avenue of the staging of this parade. Floats, bands, banners, signs, people. And as you got closer to Main Street, the spectators lining those streets, which both, I believe, Detective Casey and Sergeant Warner said were thousands of people. Before he ever gets to Barstow Avenue, he comes in contact with, after Detective Casey, Officer Buttrin and Officer Schneider. He has an opportunity, if you look at this map, he could go right on Buckley. Again, there might be police, there might be barricades. You simply stop. You ask, can I get out? No doubt in my mind, any police officer there would have done just that.
He basically, Darrell had every opportunity to avoid. He could have circumvented all of that. But he didn't. He had the intent to run these people over. He didn't care. He knew what he was doing, obviously. He wouldn't have tried to change his apparel, lift his hair up, If he didn't know what he did, and if he didn't, wasn't competent enough to try to think, well, how can I get out of this? Well, let me change my clothes. In other words, I know what I just did. Even though it doesn't make sense that when he was caught, because when he was brought to the police station, he pretended like none of this even happened. Like he was on a whole different vibe there. Like he didn't know about it. He was very unabated. Or I won't use the word unabated. Unabated means that you're impervious. Well, yeah, he was impervious. Let me think how I can use it, because impervious means you don't feel it. But that's how he showed in that interrogation room. He acted like he didn't care. Like he was indifferent. He wasn't concerned. He was more concerned with trashing Erica versus, like what he actually did post all of that. I'm talking about the parade. And I don't know how he was able to blot that out of his mind as if that didn't happen, and that did happen. You know what appalls me the most, by the way? I was looking at and we're going to get back into it. I'm sorry, y'all. Y'all know how I get. But it's interesting because I was looking at when he was initially captured by Rebecca Carpenter. Not Detective Carpenter, but Rebecca Carpenter. She was the female officer. She was the one that had asked him of his name. Now, do y'all remember when he was approached? One of the things Brooks said, and this appalled me. Oh, I was so appalled. When he had the audacity or temerity to ask, what did I do? Y'all remember he said that? What did I do? Like, bro, you know what you just did. It wasn't like it was 2 years ago, man. You know what you just did. What do you mean, what did you do? So he was already. So not only did he alter his appearance, not only did he change his hair, but he also was pretentious in asking, what did I do? As if he don't have a clue why he's being arrested. Oh, I thought that was an utter slap in the face. That was disregard. To the people and those victims and the lives that he destroyed. And then he pretended to act as he's trying to wonder, what did I do? That's dirty. That's dirty. That's nasty. That is unforgiving. That is blasphemous. I'm sorry, y'all. I just, that it was a shiver that came through my body when I heard him say, what did I do? In other words, like he didn't have any regard of what he did. Like it didn't even matter. And then when he was even in the interrogation room, how nonchalant he was. He was laughing. He was cracking jokes as if what he did didn't have any bearing. It didn't matter. How can one person be so evil? So it makes sense when Sue Opera says that Darrell Brooks is the epitome of evil. Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. All right, let's get back into this.
He could have gone left on Northeast Avenue, Continuing down, he could have gone left on Martin Street.
He could have stopped.
Continuing on, Barstow Avenue. This is where the parade participants, unfortunately, he has contact with them. But he could have gone right on Barstow. He could have gone left on Barstow. And we know from some of the footage that we saw that his car was seen flying past, true, not hitting one at this point, but flying past. There's no logical understanding for Mr. Brooks other than he's in the middle of a parade and he can see them. Anyone driving a vehicle would see what's ahead. And we know from this map, right, what was ahead of him. We saw that video footage. We heard the testimony.
Well, Judge Darrell, if I can just jump in, I like how she uses the word logical. There's no logical. Watch this. I can say the same thing. There's no logical defense. There's no logical reason as to why he did this. There's no logical defense. Do you notice that Brooks did not take the stand? Because he knew that the prosecutors would eat him up. Well, I believe also he didn't want to take the stand because he had the power to represent himself, and he wanted to use that power to grill all the witnesses. He wanted to show off in front of Erica Patterson. He wanted to, pretend that he was in power, even though he didn't have a clue what he was doing. He had no clue that he really had a shovel, and every time he spoke, he was digging his grave. And so there was no logical defense, and that's what I'm saying. I think, and let me say this, because I don't want people to misinterpret me. Yes. And I'll reiterate this. Yes, I comprehensively understand that as the Constitution says that we have a right to represent ourselves. Okay, I understand that the Constitution is in support of that. And I also will say this. The Constitution when the Constitution was written, I'm pretty sure they had no clue that a crazy man named Darrell Brooks was going to, intentionally kill people. And watch this. And then intentionally represent himself to make a whole mockery and charade and make this whole thing a farce when real people lost real people in their lives, family members. And he did it as a mockery. Just like when y'all heard he would ask witnesses, are you injured in any way? Now, him asking them that, Darrell didn't care. Here's the point. If Darrell had the intent to run them over, then why would he ask people, were you injured in any way? How is that relevant? If he had the intent to do what he did. So that lets you know he didn't care. Even though he asked the question, in theory, he did not care. This man is disgusting.
Many police vehicles at these intersections with their lights flashing. There's no doubt in my mind that Mr. Brooks would understand a parade was going on.
Exactly. He knew that.
You can turn off my monitor. Thank you. We also know it was not yet dark.
It was dusk.
Dusk. This was from the battalion chief, who talked about when he arrived after that first alert at 4:39, it was not yet dark, it was dusk. I think that aids to the visibility that Mr. Brooks would have seen all of these people. This is not under cover of night. It's, of course, downtown Waukesha. We saw city lights in many of the street lights I'm referring to in many of the videos as well that would have been on or coming on.
So basically, even though he can argue that he only got one ear, but he had both eyes. He was able to see. It was still dusk. It wasn't dark. So he can't say he didn't see the people. Come on, Judge. That's a good point.
We know just past Barstow, he strikes his first victim, Nicole White.
Nicole White.
She was with Remax Services with the hot air balloon. If anyone's seen that, we saw it in the video. That is unmistakable what that is. That would get anyone's attention. If this was a mistake, if he was lost, this was his very first opportunity to stop and do the right thing after causing injury to a person.
Right. And if he was lost, how come he didn't put the navigation system on? If he was lost, how come he didn't stop the vehicle and ask, how do I get to so-and-so? You know, so he can't use that as an excuse. He can't say, well, I was lost. You know, no, you knew exactly what you were doing. And Judge Darrell is laying it out, and it sounds so precise and detailed. It sounds so compelling and convincing that the likelihood of an appeal for Mr. Brooks, I think it's safe to say, will not likely happen. The likelihood of an appeal, come on, y'all repeat after me. The likelihood of an appeal doesn't look like that's going to likely happen.
But he didn't. He did not stop.
Exactly.
And then, of course, the Waukesha South Band. It's hard not to think about what I watched and not have this reaction.
That's understandable.
Those were images that frankly kept me up at night.
Wow.
That I saw over and over and over. For their band director, she is a hero to me, to get up on the stand, to talk about, and that was Sarah Waymeyer, Aparicio, to identify each one of her students.
All of them.
Talk about their formation, talk about what she saw.
Wow.
So strong for all of you.
You know, I'm starting to get a little emotional. I'm sorry. I mean, I can understand. You know, I was just listening to Judge Darrell. If she was that emotional like that, can you imagine what was going through the jurors' minds during before the verdicts? I'm talking about before the verdict, not the sentencing, but before, because those images that Judge Darrell just talked about were the same images that were permitted to be published in front of the jurors. The jurors seen that as well. Can you imagine what they were thinking? You know, so it makes sense why Darrell Brooks did not want the jurors to have a viewing of the vehicle, because he knew how damning that would be against him. I mean, there was still some apparel on that vehicle. relative to the impact that this man caused. And so to see Judge Darrell emotional like that, I can just imagine how those that viewed the video, how they felt. Listen, I even if, and I know that video is extremely graphic, and they will not show that video in its entirety. And I said this previously. I said I would not even want to see that. And I mean, that's like watching somebody abuse an animal, or I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see Darrell Brooks driving through a parade. And what disturbs me greatly is the fact that, and I said this before, what disturbs me is the fact that during the interrogation of Mr. Brooks, during that interrogation, Detective Carpenter invariably tried to get Mr. Brooks to watch that video, and Brooks declined. He wasn't on board watching that video. But when it came time for that video to be published in front of the jurors, which was a year later after the interrogation, it seemed like Darrell had all the interest in the world. See, he seems like he enjoyed watching that. And this man is sick. Darrell Brooks is a sick man. How can his mother assert that this was not intentional? She cares as much as about the people he killed as he does. This man is sick. And not only that, I brought up talking about, Judge Darrell, feeling emotional like that. Just like I would imagine anybody would to see something like that. I believe the Court of Appeals probably saw that video. And understands the smaller court's rulings. And agrees with it. They were all above board. Legally, they were all above board, despite Darrell Brooks's protestations. Well, let's get a little more of this. I didn't realize I was going to hear Judge Darrell so emotional like that, but I feel it. I mean, and I just look at it as if, that was one of my family members, or if it could have been me, or any one of you, or one of your loved ones. What if it was one of your loved ones or somebody you knew? And a tragedy like this has taken place. And so let's get back into this.
Mr. Brooks had another opportunity to stop. This wasn't one isolated person that he could claim, I didn't know I struck someone. This was driving over people. What Kyle Jewell described as the SUV went over people like they were big, old speed bumps.
Wow.
I know the Green children were injured around there. Thankfully, their physical injuries were minor, and I know I could probably spend a long time talking about the injuries of the band members, and I'm not going to go through that. They were significant. It was horrific. Thankfully, none of them were killed. And then, of course, moving on to Burrs Logistics.
Y'all see what he's doing? Just waving like he don't even care. He hears what she's saying because they not only do they have the monitor, but they have the audio. He hears everything what's going on, but he don't even care. He wants to come back in that courtroom to further throttle the sentencing. This is disgusting. Disgusting.
Between the band and the Blazers, that is where Kelly Graybow and her 10-year-old daughter Adelia were in that adorable Cindy Lou Who costume. And what struck me, and Kelly